Okay, everybody, for the purposes of this video, we gotta take it very seriously and do it by the book. The Bleach books, okay? So, everybody put on your smart glasses. Everybody should have a pair of smart glasses. Even if you don't actually wear glasses, everybody should have a pair of smart glasses, okay? Because today, we are talking about the lieutenant of the 1st Division. That's right, the one and only Genshiro Okikiba. You know, not a lot of people care about Genshiro Okikiba. He shows up in the very last arc, after Chojiro dies, and then Yamamoto dies, Shunsui becomes the new head captain, but we need somebody to hold the reins here. Shunsui can't do paperwork. Do you know how much stuff Chojiro probably had to do as the lieutenant of the 1st Division? And that's where Genshiro Okikiba comes in. You know what? Fun fact, and that's pretty much all we're going to talk about Genshiro today. He is the co-lieutenant next to Nanao, who we are actually talking about today. Shunsui did the ridiculous thing of when becoming a head captain to actually assign 2 Shinigami as his lieutenants. One for Nanao to basically be his, assistant, because he was already, her captain during, when he was part of the 8th Division. So it's like, all right, well, she knows how to run a division. She knows how to do all this stuff. So I want to keep her on as my lieutenant. But also, we need somebody that understands how the 1st Division works, so how about I just have 2 lieutenants? And I remember the Central 46 were, up in arms about that. They were like, rubber, 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 rubber! How dare you, a captain with 2 lieutenants? What is this? And Shunsui was just like, dude, we're in the middle of, wartime, did you not just see the freaking Quincy's that broke down our front door and, torched the entire Seirete? There's lieutenants that are dead right now, for God's sake, and I'm just the head captain is dead, and I'm requesting 2 lieutenants, and you're like, this is unheard of! Rubber, rubber, rubber. So, at any rate, they let Shunsui have 2 lieutenants. But I will say something about Genshiro. I looked up a character popularity poll, the 5th one, and this was at the time when the 1,000-Year Blood War was out and everything, so these characters were already revealed, like the Zero Squad and everything. Genshiro Okikiba ranked higher than Kiryu Hikefune and Kuromarani, who is the Afro Shinigami. Okay, so just think about that for a second. This dude that only shows up in, a few chapters, barely has any dialogue, has a pretty cool, hairstyle, I gotta admit. It's just like, well, I'm going gray, but I want that one strand of... Kubo. Kubo really likes that kind of stuff. There's a lot of characters that have, highlights and stuff in this series. But yeah, ranked higher than Kiryu Hikefune, and ranked the same as Rose. So yeah, I guess Okikiba, he was a pretty popular character. So yeah, sorry to take up some of your time there, but you gotta remember, this is the Lieutenant series of the GOTEI 13, and Genshiro Okikiba is technically a lieutenant, so I felt like I had to mention him a little bit. Anyway, moving on now to talk about the former 8th Division lieutenant under Shunsui Kyoraku and the current co-lieutenant of the 1st Division, also under Shunsui Kyoraku, Nanao Ise. Alright, so, Nanao, first impressions from her, definitely Kubo drew her as, the very serious, kind of like a librarian sort of character, just everything must be done properly, and, by the book, and paperwork, and triplicate, and all that stuff. Shunsui, why are you laying around? You should be a captain, you should be up there, and you should be fighting against the Ryoka. So I've seen this character before in manga, and I didn't really have any particular, I didn't really like her, but I didn't really hate her either, she was just there, out of all these characters Kubo introduced during the Soul Society arc, some of them are going to be a little bit more interesting than others, and more expressive and all that kind of stuff, well, Renji's not a great example, because Renji was kind of a very prominent character during, Soul Society, he's a main character, but Izuru, okay, so Izuru was introduced during the Soul Society arc, and I was kind of interested in him, oh, okay, where's this character going to go? There seems to be some layers to Izuru's character. I didn't really feel that with Nanao. I just felt like, oh, okay, I see what they're doing here, the 8th Division captain, Shunsui Kyoraku, we get introduced to him, he's kind of lazy, he just kind of, flows on the wind by his own rhythm, the beat of his own drum, he's that kind of captain, and then Nanao is the much more serious, much more I have to, do all the paperwork and do everything myself, because he's always lazing around, and that's kind of their character dynamic, and I'm like, alright, I've seen that before, kind of the opposite of, Rangiku and Toshiro's dynamic, where Rangiku is the lieutenant that's always kind of lazing around, and Toshiro is the one that has to do all the work. But at the end of the day, they can rely on each other. You know, Rangiku can definitely fight. Same thing with Shunsui. It's not that he's lazy, that he's weak. It's just that, like I said, he like goes to the life with a beat of his own drum kind of deal, right? So I definitely warmed up to Nanao more as the story progresses. We honestly don't get that much stuff with her, though. Like, it doesn't help that she's completely absent during the entirety of the Fake Karakura Town arc. Like, she's just gone. Like, seriously. Like, even Chodro, who didn't do really anything during the Fake Karakura Town arc, he was at least there, right? I mean, at least during the Soul Society arc, we had like 2 moments with her that really stick out. The first moment was after Shunsui defeats Chad. And so that was a cool episode in and of itself. I would recommend just to go back and watch that episode, because the episode after Chad defeats Tetsufusa and Joji, who was the 3rd seed of the 8th division, he then goes after Shunsui, right? And so Shunsui's there, and Nanao's like doing the flower petals. So that's, okay, I will say that was a little bit different than what I originally expected from her, because if she's like this really serious, you know, astute kind of character that wears glasses, you know, you'd think she would not go along with like the nonsense that Shunsui's always saying, like, Nanao, yes, I want to make an epic entrance for the Ryoka, so I'm going to float down from the balcony, and I want you to take this giant bowl of flower petals and just, you know, rain them down on me in elegance, as if we're in a Japanese kabuki play or whatever. And Nanao goes along with it. She's like, okay, Captain, I'll do that. You know, these are, you know, invading Ryoka that are coming into the Soul Society now. And now, of course, Ichigo's group is trying to rescue Rukia. They're not trying to, like, kill anybody or anything, but they don't know that. It's like, yeah, we're kind of in the middle of a crisis right now, but okay, I'll go along with your plan of the flower petals thing. So that was kind of interesting. And then, of course, she takes the whole thing and just dumps it on his head. So I'm like, all right, that's kind of funny. That's kind of interesting there. Okay. But that episode where Chad is like just charging at Shunsui, and he's remembering his past with Ichigo, and then you got like an instrumental version of Number One playing in the background, and Chad's like charging up his arm, and he's like, Ichigo, I know you believe in me, that believes in you, that believes in my right arm, that believes in my coin. I can do this! Ah! And then Shunsui just shing, and of course cuts Chad down without even releasing his Zanpaktou. That's really hurting my nose because these are not properly adjusted. So he slices down Chad in one fluid movement as if in a play, and Chad drops, but he doesn't kill him. And then the scene with Nanao is Nanao shows up later, and then she kind of like charges up some Kido in her arm and like about to release a Hado or something. And she's like, Captain, he's still alive. Shall I end it? And Shunsui's like, no, just calm down. We're not going to kill him. Let's just, you know, let's just throw them in jail. You know, let's shackle them so they can't use their Ryatsu. But we're not killers. We don't need to do this, right? And so I think because Shunsui kind of sensed, you know, there's something going on here in the Soul Society. This is a little weird. There's a few machinations going on in the background. Aizen is killed. I think that's the practical reason why he didn't kill Chad. That's what he told Nanao. He's like, we still don't know who killed Aizen. So a captain is dead and these Ryoka are invading. Make sure to keep them alive, right? But Nanao, I mean, she was ready to deal the coup de grace on Chad. She was ready to be like, shall I end this? And Nanao is an absolute genius when it comes to Kido. Like, even more so than other characters that are really good at it. Like, Momo is really good at using Kido. Like, Izuru's pretty decent at it. You know, Nanao, I think, is the best out of all of the lieutenants, of the original lieutenants that we get introduced to that can use Kido. Let me just go down the list really quick, you know. So, obviously, Marechio has no talent for it. You know, Renji doesn't have any talent for it. Izuru and Shuhei are, like, okay with it. You know, Iba is, like, jack of all trades. He's like, you know, 50-50 with Kido. He's like, I learned it. I can do some things, but I'm not great. Rangiku can do it a little bit. You know, Yachiru, no. Nemu really didn't have any. Nemu is like an artificial soul there. And then, you know, the Kaien is dead. So yeah, out of all the original lieutenants, I would say that Nanao is probably the best at using Kido, and she's a like, legitimate genius when it comes to it. In fact, probably, I think it was even stated in the chapter, which Nanao doesn't get a cover, but this is where Nanao's fight against Lilia takes place in volume 71. I think it was even stated that Nanao was originally set to join the Kido Corps because due to her family's lineage, she cannot unlock an Asuchi. She couldn't, have her own Zanpaktou, and we'll get into that in a second because that's like a big part of the character later on during the final arc. So she couldn't master a Zanpaktou. She couldn't even unlock a Zanpaktou, but she had like insane talent for Kido. So I think she was like about to join the Kido Corps originally, but then Shunsui, was like, oh, I want her in my division because of the whole backstory with Shunsui's brother marrying Nanao's mother, so that was like his sister-in-law was Nanao's mother, so that's the whole reason that went down there. But yeah, so make no mistake, Nanao really, under certain circumstances, she would belong in the Kido Corps, and we don't know much about the Kido Corps during the, Bleach series. We don't really find a lot of it out, maybe in like a light novel or something. It's explained a little bit more on like what the structure of it. We know Tessai used to be the captain 100 years ago, and we know Hachigen used to be the vice captain. Beyond that, we don't know much, but she would definitely, I could see Nanao under different circumstances being the lieutenant in the Kido Corps for how skilled she is. Like, even during the final arc, she developed a Kido directly suited to repel Quincy's, and Quincy's whole thing is to absorb Ryatsu, so most Kido is useless because you fire Kido and a Quincy could just absorb it with like their Sclavere technique or whatever. But Nanao figured out not just one barrier technique, she figured out 2 different unique barrier techniques to repel Quincy's in like a matter of days between the invasions. She figured this out. So absolute genius with that, right? So she's great with Kido and everything, so I have no doubt in my mind she would have been able to like finish off Chad with an attack, but Shunsui held her back. And then the other moment during the Soul Society arc where she does something is when they're all going to fight against Yamamoto. So this is at the point when they interrupt the execution. Ukitake shows up with that rope thing from the Shihoin clan and like destroys the Sokyoku, which is like high treason right there. And then freaking Shunsui and Ukitake go to fight Yamamoto to the old city, and Nanao is like, okay, I'll come too. And then she ends up there kind of like following behind a little bit because they're faster. And it's kind of this moment where it's like, okay, you guys are squaring off against the head captain and he is mighty pissed. So how's this gonna go, right? And so Nanao, she's not shaken by this initially. She realizes what her captain means to do. This is literally her captain defecting, essentially. Not really, but in the eyes of the Soul Society, that's what it's going to be looked like. You just destroyed the Sokyo, like this holy implement, you just destroyed it, and then you helped the Ryoka get away. This is gonna, you have to answer to some of this stuff. And despite Nanao being like, up until that point we thought, by the book and all that kind of stuff, no, she stands behind her captain. She stands behind Shunsui and Ukitake because she's like, look, I'm not 100% sure why you're doing this or what your plan is, but Nanao trusts Shunsui, and she's like, I'll follow you wherever, even if it means going up against the head captain himself. And even in that moment, she's like, there's not much I can do here. Understatement of the century, right? There's not much I can do here against a fight with 3 captains, 2 of which being the strongest captains in the GOTEI, and then the head captain, the strongest in the GOTEI, but I can at least try something. And she's about to like reach into her Shihakusho to pull out her Zanpaktou, I believe, because it was stated, and we even see it here kind of in the, I think this is actually the only time it is drawn by Kubo. We see Nanao right here, there's a little bit of a glare here, and her Zanpaktou right there is in her sleeve, although we find out later she doesn't have a Zanpaktou, so that's just like a knife. It's just like a short sword, like a wakizashi or like a tanto kind of deal. She just keeps in her sleeve. You might say, it's like, well, even though she doesn't have a Zanpaktou, probably to keep up appearances, so other people know, because it's weird if you're a lieutenant and you're walking around and you don't have a sword, period. Like, that's gonna, people are gonna ask some questions about that. So she's like, no, I have a Zanpaktou. It's a wakizashi. I keep it inside my my Shihakusho at all times. And also, it could still be useful because we've seen Kido techniques that can be used to combine with swords to make energy Kido blades or whatever. Shunsui actually even used one against Lilia. He used a Kido blade technique, a Hado, during his fight with Lille Barro. So yeah, and then there's also the Suzui Raisen, the bound lightning, when Shuhei was fighting against Ion. He basically it was a Hado that created an electrical charge through the chain of Kazeshini. So I'm sure there's like a few techniques with Nanao especially that she could channel into her little Tanto blade to make the blade like a lightsaber, or maybe channel electricity or fire, and using the sword as basically just a conduit. It's not a real Zanpaktou, but she could still use it. Anyway, she was about to pull that out against freaking Yamamoto. She was like, there's not much I can do here, but I can do something. I'm gonna fight against, and then freaking Yamamoto just gives her the death stare. Just boom! stern old man Yama death glare. And it is super effective, okay? It's way more gruesome in the manga. In the anime, it's just a thing where Nanao just kind of like starts shaking and starts sweating and like almost passes out, and Shunsui has to kind of like appear in front of her and just kind of like block the attack. And then Shunsui's like, yeah, I'm sorry for bringing you. I should have known that was gonna end that way. It's all right. And so Shunsui just kind of picks up Nanao, flash steps away, sets her down, and then flash steps back to the battle. And we don't get to see anything more of Nanao in that fight. But in the manga, it's a lot more like she's like foaming at the mouth and shit, and she's like passing out. You know, it's like way worse in the manga. But at any rate, yeah. So those are like the two scenes with Nanao in the Soul Society arc that I really remember. I think more so than any other, I shouldn't say any other lieutenant, but during filler arcs, she shows up a lot. She shows up either for more comic relief or for explaining things, because she's more like, she's more intelligent when it comes to like the lore and the backstory of the Soul Society. So if you need somebody in a filler arc to go through a library or something and pull out a book and explain like, this is why the Bounce are doing what they're doing, or this is what Reigai are, or this is what the Amagai clan is doing, or whatever, that would be Nanao. That would be what you would look for. You know, it's like, Nanao, go to the library and like, okay, well, it's clearly this. You know, that's kind of like what she does during filler arcs a lot. But barring filler arcs, yeah, she doesn't really show up a lot after the Soul Society arc. We got the Arrancar arc, where I think she was part of the team to figure out what Aizen was trying to do. So he was trying to make the Oken, and so she was part of that group to try to figure that out in the Dare Shakaido, like the big library in the Soul Society. So she was there for that. But yeah, fake Karakura, she doesn't show up at all. And her absence is never explained, but it does make sense, because literally every other member of the GOTEI 13 is either at fake Karakura to fight against Aizen's army, or they're in Hueco Mundo trying to help out Ichigo, okay? Like, literally everybody. Like, let me just... Yamamoto and Shojiro, fake Karakura. Marechio and Soifone, fake Karakura. Izuru is in fake Karakura. Gin defected, he's in fake Karakura. Unohana and Asane, they go to Hueco Mundo. You got Aizen, of course, defected. Momo went to fake Karakura after she felt better. Byakuya and Renji both went to Hueco Mundo. Sajin and Iba, fake Karakura. And then Shunsui himself just goes to fake Karakura. Tozen defected. Shuhei's at fake Karakura. Toshiro and Rangiku, fake Karakura. Kenpachi and Yachiru, Hueco Mundo. Mayori and Nemu, Hueco Mundo. And then Ukitake stays at fake Karakura. So pretty much just Nanao, and then Kione and Sentaro, the two third seats of the 13th division under Ukitake, are the highest ranked officers in the entirety of the Soul Society when this shit goes down, alright? Which I think I remember vaguely thinking, remember the scene where after Aizen defeats everybody and then has to go into the Soul Society to complete the Oken, because that's where the real Karakura town is, right? So he goes into the Soul Society, and I'm thinking like, man, that's kind of biting you guys in the butts now, isn't it? Like, you had nobody stay behind in the Seirete while all this stuff was going on. I mean, yeah, you got all the seated officers and everything, but that's all you left it? So I'm thinking, like, man, Aizen and Gin are gonna walk through the Senkaimon, go into the Soul Society, and Nanao's gonna be there. Nanao's gonna be there with Kione and Sentaru behind her, and she's just gonna be taking off her glass. She's gonna stare Aizen right in the face. And this is like perfect God Aizen. He's got the long hair, Gin's gonna be next to him, and they're gonna walk out of the Senkaimon gate. Nanao's just gonna be there, just taking off her glasses, which apparently is supposed to be a very intimidating thing. Like, even Mayuri Kurotsuchi was terrified by this, apparently, when Nemu takes off her glasses and just gives you the disapproving glare, you know, and so she does that, and Aizen walks through, and Gin immediately passes out immediately, and then Aizen, it's gonna take all of Aizen's god power, the Hogyoku cracks. Nanao takes off her glasses, the Hogyoku just, how dare you! I knew you were the strongest opponent, that's why they left you behind, you know, and Nanao is just gonna be like, Aizen, just turn around. Just turn around and leave. You don't want to fight me, right? So no, we don't see her at all. But it makes sense that you would leave all of the Seirete in the hands of somebody capable. And out of all of the lieutenants, I would say Nanao is certainly the most capable, right? So I guess that makes sense. But it was like it was never acknowledged. It was never mentioned. Like, Shunsui never brought up, like, yeah, Nanao, she's staying behind in the Soul Society. She's making sure to run everything. And it's just weird that she was the only one that didn't show up. Because Kione and Sentaro are not even technically technically lieutenants. They're co-third seats, okay? But a little bit weird anyway. And also opening up for an attack. Like, what if Aizen decided not to invade Fate Karakura and he decided just to invade Soul Society instead, like it was a like a tactic or something, just like a subterfuge, like, oh, they're gonna think I'm gonna invade Fate Karakura, and so they set this whole thing up and everything. I'm actually going to invade the Soul Society directly. Like, what? You know, and I was like, how could he have gotten there from Hueco Mundo? Well, he went from the Soul Society into Hueco Mundo, so it's Aizen we're talking about here. He's got the magic orb. He could figure some way to go from Hueco Mundo to the Soul Society. I guarantee you he could have figured that out, right? At any rate, yeah, so that's Fate Karakura, and then the Fullbringer arc, she doesn't appear really at all until the very end, and then boom, Fate Karakura is finally when we get a decent amount of character development with her, including her past with her mother and her whole clan, and her Zanpaktou and what that really means, and her relationship with Shunsui, right? So immediately the first time that's a big deal is the kind of she's like pushed into the forefront is after Yamamoto and Shojiro die, and Shunsui has to kind of go before the Central 46, and he leaves a note for Nanao, kind of like, we might have to part ways here because I'm not really sure how this is going to go. They're going to probably want me to be the new head captain, and I really don't want that position, but if they make me that, I have to be that. But if I can bring you with me to the first division, I will, but I don't know what'll happen. So he argues with the Central 46, but eventually they agree that he can have 2 lieutenants as the head captain. And so you got Nanao and you got Okikiba, all right? So there's a lot of moments there. There's the moment during the second invasion when Hashwolf arrives, and he just goes straight to the first division barracks, and Nanao sets up this barrier that was specifically designed to repel Quincy's. And Hashwolf is like, oh wow, this is a splendid barrier. This is actually quite impressive. I actually can't break through this. And you know, it's Hashwolf. He's very stoic. He's very cool. So he's not going to be like, what? A barrier? How dare you? So he's like, yeah, fine craftsmanship. Yes, see, I see, of course. And so that holds him at bay for a while. He's slowly like siphoning off the Ryatsu from his side of the barrier, while Nanao is like reinforcing it from her side of the barrier, kind of like a Ryatsu tug of war kind of thing. And after this goes on for a little while, and after Nanao kind of catches on to what he's doing, she then switches up the barrier to like a hexagonal barrier, and hexagons are the bestagons, so Nanao, she knows how this works, right? And we never really get to see how this barrier works, but it was cool because Hashwolf was kind of like, this barrier seems a lot weaker than your previous barrier. It's got like seams in it, which probably means that if I try to break it, something bad will happen, like it'll explode in my face. And Nanao is just kind of like, you want to give it a try? Well, I guess we'll find out. Try to break it, then we'll see. So Nanao, I'm liking this. It's like she's the first division lieutenant, and she steps up to that. She's like, okay, this is what we're doing now. My captain is now not just a captain, he is the head captain. I am the lieutenant. I am the first lieutenant. This. I'm gonna be up all night brewing some tea. I'm gonna make me, actually, she hates green tea. She doesn't like green tea. Same thing with Shunsui, doesn't like it. Anyway, she's brewing some coffee, right? And she's like, I'm gonna come up with these new Kido spells specifically designed to fight against the Quincy's. And I'm sure she probably came up with a few of these, and we just didn't get to see them all. But it would have been cool. That would have been really nice, like tactical, because if there was anybody in the Soul Society that could be like an expert with Kido, outside of the Kido Corps themselves, who really don't show up much during the 1,000-Year Blood War arc. You think the Kido Corps would be relevant here. They show up to escort Aizen out of the prison, but they don't really get involved in the fight at all. So, I don't know, what's with the infrastructure of the Seireitai? We got the GOTEI, the 13 Court Guard squads, then you got the Stealth Corps, then you got the freaking Kido Corps. And it seems like during that last arc, only the GOTEI really did anything of relevance, right? I mean, Soifone is a member of the Stealth Corps, but like, where were all like the ninjas that were part of the Stealth Corps? Did they just have the day off and then the Kido Corps just they go off somewhere else? Like the Soul Society's being invaded, nothing? Like, okay, whatever. Maybe they were like, hey, that's not our job. That's not in our job description. It says right here, GOTEI 13. They're the ones charged with protecting the Soul Society. Then they all gather together after during the final part of the arc to get blasted off to the Soul Palace for the final battle there. There was an awesome scene between Nanao and Kenpachi, because after Kenpachi's fight with Gremmy, after he unlocks his Shikai, he's getting healed, and then he wakes up, and he's like, where's Yachiru? And everyone's like, we don't know. And he's like, I'm gonna go find her. And he's like, well, we would rather you stay here, because we need everybody's Ryatsu to work together to power this gate so we can get to the Soul Palace. And Kenpachi's like, screw that, I'm gonna go look for Yachiru. here. And Nanao, not Uehara, not Byakuya, not Ukitake, it's Nanao that steps up in front of Kenpachi freaking Zaraki and is like, hey, sit down. This is important, all right? She'll be fine. We'll find her. You need to stay here right now because we're going to need you when we get up there. We're going up against the freaking Quincy's here and like he's absorbed the Soul King and all this crazy shit. We're going to need you here, Captain Zaraki. And so he just kind of looks at Nanao. Nanao just kind of looks at him and Kenpachi's like, whatever. Grumble, grumble. Guess I'll stay. Yeah, that was an awesome moment. That was cool. Nanao has that power, right? Okay, so anyway, they get into the Soul Palace, and Nanao sticks to Shunsui, and then the fight happens. The fight between Lille Barro, Sternritter X, the X-axis, the strongest of the Sternritter, the first one created by his own declaration. Is like, I am the first creation by Master Yuha. I am his magnum opus. I am the greatest Quincy, the strongest Quincy ever in the entirety of our Varvelt, in the entirety of the Vonenreich and our Quincy Empire. Next to our king, our god, I am the strongest Quincy, okay? And he's shown that because literally Shunsui goes into his Bankai and does the 4 acts of his play, literally decapitates Lilia, you know, inflicts a horrible disease on him, drags him down into the depths of the ocean, and he still won't die. Lilia can just get his head cut off, and he just has his whole body change and get turned into light. Light was definitely a very big premise with Lilia. I'm not really sure. I still don't know to this day why he took the form of like a giant flamingo owl. Maybe a reference to like Hermes or something. I don't really know what you're doing here, Kubo, but that's the form he takes. And he's able to create like giant light balls and like throw at people. Kind of like Homeless Emperor in One Punch Man sort of is like his power. And he can make like a giant blast called Trumpet. And it's like a giant trumpet blast that just like obliterates part of like the ground. You know, so he's an extraordinarily powerful opponent. Shunsui throws everything in his arsenal at him. He, you know, uses Kido, doesn't work. Uses his Shikai, doesn't work. Uses his Bankai, even that doesn't work. And so you have a moment where Shunsui's on the ground bleeding, you know, internal injuries, and he's like, man, I just hope everybody got away. I hope Nanao managed to escape. You know, and so he has his Zanpaktou Katen Kyokatsu. And Ohana, which is the older woman that takes the form of like the, you know, the woman with the big boobs and everything, and is there, and is kind of like Shunsui's lover, to be honest with you. And we also see them during the, you know, the Zanpaktou filler arc, so that was really cool. And so she's there, and you know, she's telling Shunsui that it's okay to run, it's okay to lie down and get some sleep, and we'll be together forever. You know, I used every ounce of my power with my abilities as your Zanpaktou, and that didn't work. So it's okay to just give up. You know, you've done your best, and it just wasn't enough. And so it seems like Shunsui's about to resign himself to die in that scene. Like, he closes his eyes, and he's just ready to go unconscious and then just die, I guess. And then Nanao is the one that wakes him up. Nanao, like, grabs him and is like, you know, Captain, wake up! And Shunsui's like, oh, Nanao, you're okay? And he's, like, coughing up blood. And then now it's like, oh my god. He's like, listen, you need to give me my Zanpaktou. Forget the promise you made to my mom. You need to give me my Zanpaktou back. It's the only way to defeat him, okay? And so this is the backstory that we get. And you know what? It was one of those backstories that was kind of just thrown in. And it's weird because, like I said, we don't get that much of Nanao during the course of Bleach. So you'd think that, like, oh man, this character that we don't know really anything about just gets a backstory at the 11th hour, and we're supposed to care about it. I don't know what to tell you. The way that Kubo implemented this fight, it worked perfectly for me. I don't know if it worked perfectly for you. And there's other moments in Bleach where I can definitely say, oh man, this was just ham-fisted. This was just thrown in at the last minute. But this wasn't one of them. This was one of them where I think it was because everything leading up to this fight was Shunsui referencing things from his past, and we knew Shunsui had some sort of complicated past that he wasn't really letting on to. Like, he's this very carefree guy, but there's some darkness that happened in his backstory that involved Nanao, and we just didn't know what it involved or whatever. So when we finally find out about this, everything kind of clicks. It makes sense. So Nanao's mother, we don't get her name, but she used to be the old head of the Ise clan, which is a clan of priestesses in the Soul Society. Every baby born in the Ise clan is female. And in order to, you know, have more children, they have to marry outside of the Ise clan, and then they have children who are always women. However, every man that marries into the Ise clan ends up dying very young. Okay, and so as it happened, Shunsui's older brother, who I don't believe we know his name either, married Nanao's mother. So Nanao's mother was Shunsui's sister-in-law during the time when they were married. Now, Nanao's mom left the Ise clan. She didn't get married while she was part of it. She left it because she's like, I don't want anything to do with this curse, this clan. I'm going to leave the clan, and then maybe the curse won't work. And so she'll go and marry someone else, and she married Shunsui's older brother, and then they lived happily for a little while, but that didn't stop the curse. And so Shunsui's older brother died. And then eventually, Nanao's mother went back to the Ise clan, and then she ended up dying as well. However, one thing that's interesting about the Ise clan is their Zanpaktou, which is shared and passed down through the generations of the heads of this priestess clan. So that's something very interesting, a very unique part of lore in the Bleach world, where usually a Zanpaktou is, you get an Asuchi, Nimaya created the Asuchis, and then you pour your Ryatsu into it, and you imprint on a Zanpaktou, and you create your own sword. Like, literally out of a fragment of your soul, it becomes your Zanpaktou. You and the blade are one. You are the same, okay? But in the case with Nanao's Ise family line, it's one Zanpaktou for every head of the family. So even if, like, Nanao wanted to make her own Zanpaktou, she simply couldn't. When she was at the Reijutsu Academy, she couldn't make her own Zanpaktou out of an Asuchi. So it was passed down. However, Nanao's mom did not want Nanao to inherit the sword because she was thinking that, like, maybe it's part of the reason the curse exists is through this sword. So I'm going to get rid of the sword. So she gives the sword to Shunsui to hide, which he does, but that's like a national treasure of the Seirei. This is literally like one of the most important, like, religious, like, Shinto clans in the entirety of the Soul Society. And the head of the clan has this treasured object passed down through probably like thousands of generations. And then all of a sudden she's like, yeah, I lost it. You lost the treasured sword capable of dispersing the powers of God himself. Yeah, I'm sorry. I was, like, spring cleaning, and I set it down for, like, 5 seconds, and I turned around. I just can't find it. I believe that's how she died. I believe she was executed for that, because she lost a national treasure of the Soul Society. The Ise clan was not part of the 4 noble clans of the Soul Society. But it was still a very high-ranking clan for those reasons. So I believe that's why she died. And so Nanao ended up being raised by an elderly couple that was, like, distantly related to the Ise clan, like a branch family. And her childhood wasn't bad. I mean, she was raised, by these elderly couple, and they treated her like their own daughter. And Lisa was her friend growing up, so we see her during the Turn Back the Pendulum. So her upbringing wasn't really that bad. And then she ended up in the 8th division because of Shunsui, because Shunsui was like, all right, I gotta watch over her, kind of like as her godfather, it's like watch over her and make sure she's okay, because that's what my brother would want. That's what my, Nanao is the child of Shunsui's brother and Nanao's mom, right? I mean, obviously, but I just realized that. Yeah, obviously that is their child, so they are related, right? Like, by blood. So anyway, that's the reason that, Shunsui accepted her into the 8th division rather than the Kido division, right? So anyway, and now even at that young age knew, like, the connection. Like, Shunsui didn't tell her, but she figured it out, because she was like, okay, he's wearing my mother's kimono. That kimono that Shunsui always wears, the pink one, that's Nanao's mom's. Okay, and then the hairpin, I think, was his brother's. So it's like Shunsui had that line of dialogue where he was like, why do people that I cherish keep dying? And why do they keep giving me mementos to remember their death? Why does this keep happening? Like, people I love keep dying, and they keep giving me stuff, like, So that's why he wears the kimono, and that's why he wears the hairpin, all right? And so Nanao knew all of this pretty early on, that, like, Shunsui has the treasured Zanpaktou object and all that stuff. And so the other half of Shunsui's Zanpaktou, Kyokatsu, the younger girl that has, like, the ninja mask and everything, she's the one that hid the Shinken Hyakyoken, which is the treasured sword of the Ise family. And so Shunsui gives it back to her and says, okay, this is the cherished artifact of the Ise family. If there's anybody that could wield it, it's you, Nanao. Nanao is technically the head of the Ise family for that reason. It's like, if your mom was the head and she's gone, then yeah, you would be the head now. And so he gives the sword over to Nanao, and Nanao takes it out, and it looks so badass. Like just a design. I mean, first off, it looks like a ceremonial tool. It does not look like a standard sword. If this was like a ceremony that you would see something using in that kind of capacity, that's what this thing looks like. It has 4 mirrors on both sides, so 8 mirrors. The literal translation of the sword is Shinken Hyakyoken, Divine Sword 8 Mirror Sword. Yes, the actual kanji for sword, Ken, appears twice during this name. So it's literally Divine Sword Mirror Sword is basically the name of this. I love it. It has sword in the title twice, and yet it's not an actual sword. It doesn't have a blade. So you know this is an awesome sword, right? And so she pulls that out, and she fights against Lilia. Now, here's the thing. The sword looks cool, and the way that it defeats Lilia is cool, but this is pretty much a Deus Ex Machina. Let's not kid ourselves here, right? It's literally a sword, which the description of the sword verbatim is, it takes the power of God into itself and disperses it in all directions. This description, and this is not something that this is apparently something that was passed down throughout the generations. Like, it takes the power of God and then disperses it out with the mirrors, okay? Almost as if this sword was catered to fighting against. It can't fight against anybody because it doesn't have a blade, but the only thing it could fight against is a godly character that channels the power of light. Well, it's a good thing Lille Barro's power is turning into a god that has the ability to channel light. That's a big coinky-dink, is it not? I mean, like, it's literally my god, you need to use the weapon that's perfectly suited for the only thing that could defeat him, and we had it this whole time. That's convenient, here you go. Like I said, it looks cool, and the battle is cool. The premise itself is kind of weak, but my favorite part of this battle is not even the Shinken Hyakyoken, it's the moment when Nanao is standing there and she's so confident, and she even says to Shunsui, like, you know, it's okay to give me my mother's sword back, the curse will not affect me, and the man that I admire, the man that I adore, talking about Shunsui, would not believe such a curse anyway, would scoff at such a curse. So Nanao takes out the sword, though, and she's shaking. She's like, I'm gonna fight Lilia. My captain's already wounded. He's not gonna be able to fight. I'm gonna take care of this on my own. So she jumps out of the shadow, really badass. She pulls out the sword, she disperses the light, and she's fighting against Lilia. So this is one of those, like, it's like a scene in a video game where you have the magic sword that can, like, one-hit the boss, or maybe, like, 2 or 3 hits will kill him. But you still have to hit him, and he might hit you first. So it's a thing where Nanao is fighting, and she's really confident, but she's never really fought with a sword before. She's never had to. She was like a Kido-based fighter. And so she's wielding this sword, and she's actually starts terrifying. Her body starts locking up. And one of the attacks, like, Lilia fires a light beam, and she uses the Shinken Hyakyoken to block the shot and disperse it, but she still gets cut, like, on her leg, and she's like, oh my god, is this what it's like to be in an actual fight? Like, this is terrifying, you know, like, my body's freezing up, and I can't move my legs, and I got cut, and there's blood running down my leg, and it hurts, and I don't know if I'm gonna be able to do this. And then Shunsui appears behind her to kind of give her that extra push, to kind of, like, I'm here, I believe in you, I trust you, I'm always going to be by your side to support you. You can do this, Nanao. You can do it. You know, and so she's like, that gives her the confidence, and she slices down Lilia, cuts him with the blade, takes in the light, and then boom! Disperses it, and that's how Lilia is defeated. It destroys the halo, which is kind of like the source of all his god powers, and Lilia falls down into light rain, down to the Seirete, where he reforms as a bunch of flamingos. because that's how you do. And then Izuru, zombie Izuru, shows up there and starts fighting against the flamingos, but we don't get to see how that fight concludes. I think that's explained later in the Can't For Your Own World, but we don't find out how that fight concludes. So Nanao doesn't kill Lilia, but takes him out of the battle and pretty much, removes all that stuff. Also, I'm assuming when Yuha gathered all the power back into himself, Yuha gathered the power. That's how Harold Valkyrie ended up dying. Probably the same kind of deal maybe happened with Lilia, I would assume. We just didn't get to see it. Like, he's absorbed back into Yuha, and then Ichigo kills him. So there you go. Because when Ichigo and Renji show up at the Soul Society at the final battle with Aizen and Yuha, yeah, we don't see the Lilia flamingos anywhere, so probably Yuha just dragged them all back into himself, right? So that's the moment I liked. We got a lot of stuff with Nanao there, and that last moment where it's like, you're injured, you did everything you could, you used your Bankai, I'll take care of this, I'll finish him off. And then that moment where she's terrified, like, I don't think I can do this. Shunsui appears and it's like, it's okay, you can do this. Very similar to the way that Byakuya kind of supported Rukia at that final battle with Asnote, where she was like, I don't know if I can do this, and then Byakuya's like, no, my sister Rukia will be the one to finish you off, Asnote. She can do this, and he gives her some words of encouragement, and then she goes into her Bankai, right? So, yeah, Shinken Hyakyoken, really cool sword. I don't even know if this thing, Shikai and Bankai, I don't even know if that apply to this thing, because it's such a weird aberration in the Soul Society, so it's probably just like this ceremonial tool, and it just stays in this fixed form. But such a very, the ability to take in the power of a god and disperse it if they're made of light is kind of like a very specific ability. Like, does that imply there are other gods that are made of light similar to Lilia? Because I highly doubt that, Lilia is the only being here. Could you use this thing against Yuha? That's kind of interesting. What if you take the Shinken Hyakyoken and you stab Yuha, or you stab the Soul King with it? Like, do they have to be made out of light, or is it just a godly character? What constitutes god? Because Urahara's kind of a god, right? Usopp is kind of a god. Would it work on Usopp? I don't know. It's just like the premise of it. It's like, it would kind of be like, okay, we're fighting an opponent that can only be defeated by a very specific blade that uses electricity, and nobody else has any ability that can use electricity, and then all of a sudden, wow, check it out, we found this sword that can channel thunder and electricity. I'm like, wow, that's really helpful. So, yeah, it's one of those. But at any rate, that's Nanao, and up until the epilogue of the story, she is still just with Okikiba. She is still the co-lieutenant of the 1st Division, and still doing the same kind of shtick with Shunsui, like, Captain, it's time for the ceremony to welcome the new captain. Rukia is becoming captain today. All right, I guess I'll get moving. So it's the same basic stuff, and, yeah, I like her character, so that's cool with Nanao. And, like I said, last part of the story arc where we found out about her past, I think it worked for what it was. So, with that being said, there's only a few of these lieutenants left here, but let's see who's going to be next. I actually do not know who we got here. Maybe I should do point to 2 characters now, because we're really running out of characters here. Here and here. All right, we got Shuhei and we got Izuru. So we already did Shuhei. So next video will be about Izuru Kira, the other prominent character on this poster, the 2 in the foreground, Izuru and Shuhei. So yeah, Izuru Kira, cool character, a lot of stuff with him, a lot of supplemental stuff with Izuru, a lot of bonus chapter and Omake and extra stuff Kubo has talked about, and light novel stuff with Izuru, so I'll have to do a lot of reading. Any big fans of Izuru Kira out there, please comment down below if there's a lot of bonus stuff, because I don't read all of the light novels and everything, and some of them haven't even been translated in English, so, and the data books and everything, so just let me know down below, all the bullet points I need to know about Izuru that I would not get from the main manga. I'll cover the main manga stuff, but if you can, send me a bullet point list, that would be very useful as well for the next video, so I don't forget anything. Thanks for watching, everybody. This will be Tekking and Barry signing out.